Hello, my name's Merlin and welcome to Get Started. In this episode we're going to be looking at putting colour to our brand new models. First off, we'll look at the Terminator. This is a refresher course reminding you how to paint Blood Angels, plus adding some extra steps that are exclusive to the Terminators. Then we'll be batch painting. This is a process where we take a group of models that share a colour scheme, apply one paint to all of the models before moving on to the next one, and so on. For this example, I'll be painting 5 Termagants, up to the battle ready standard. Right, grab your brushes, shake your paints, and I'll see you at the painting table. First off, for our Terminator, we want to get a solid base coat of Mephisto Red all over him. I've already primed him with Colour Forge's Sanguine Red. So that's a step ahead. We just need the one layer of the Mephisto Red. So we've got a solid coat to work on in case of mistakes later on. So loading up onto our brush, we'll go over the entire model. Up next is Abaddon Black, and this is for the details such as the chest eagle, so just in here, any joints in the armour such as behind the knees, and exclusive for Terminators we need to paint their power fists. Also, if you're a sergeant, you'll want to paint both shoulder pads. With the black dry, we'll move on to lead belcher for all our metal details. So we've got stuff like the bolt gun, the cables behind the arm, the vents on the backpack, as well as any lenses and details around the face mask. And we've also got the pipe on his base detail to pick out as well. After that is on to Retributor armour. We've only got a couple of details to do. So we've got the little Crux Terminatus on his belt here, the honour marking. And we've got the symbol on the bolter casing, as well as the ammunition in the magazine. Finally, we got these skulls on the wrist. Then with some fresh clean water in our water pot, we're moving over to Scream Pink, and this is for the wax on any purity seals. Then it's on to rack our flesh for the parchment of the purity seals. Next we're ready to paint all the Crux Terminatus and the stone with Mechanicus Standard Grey. So we've got bits of rock on the base here, and the big one under his foot. We've then got the Crux Terminatus on his right knee and the one on his left shoulder pad. Next up, we're going to add some squad markings with Avalan Sunset. So in Blood Angels, this is usually on the knee pad, usually the right, but as our right knee pad's took up with a Crux Terminatus, we'll just apply some to the left instead. So this will mark him out as first company, first squad. Might need to go over with a second layer, as yellow is a fairly pale colour on top of a red. Up next, we'll return to Mephisto Red just to tidy up any areas we've made a few mistakes to. So we got that little bit of the armour there, we got a bit of gold on the hip guard just there. Tidy up on the shoulder pad. With all our tidying ups dry, we're going to grab our mix of Agrax Earthshade to 2 parts Lamy Medium, and we're going to give the model an all over shade, working it into all the details of all the colours we've just painted. Once that's dry, we have one last little step to do to complete our model. For our next stage, we need 2 colours. First off is Corax White, and we need to base coat all our lenses. So that includes his eyes, like so. And the lenses up here on top of his headgear. And once that's dry, we're going to go in with Tesseract Glow and give it a beautiful green glow to the eyes. You'll also want to do this to the light at the top of the teleport Homer if you built that. With that dry, that's our Terminator finished. Now we'll move on to our Termagants. So we have our 5 Termagants. I've already primed them using white bone from Colourforge, and our first colour is to give an all over base coat of Wraithbone. So making sure we work it into all the areas where the spray's missed. Do this over all 5 models, then we're ready to start applying the rest of the colours. So now that our 5 Termagants are all base coated with Wraithbone, we'll start applying our layers, and our first one is Grey Seer for all the carapace. So now we can start delving into the batch painting process. So what we do is we'll paint all the carapace on our first Termagant. Then we'll move on to the second. And by the time we finished our last Termagant, our first one should be dry, ready to do the second layer. Going back to our first Termagant then, we've got the grey down on all 5, and let's put a second layer on just to make sure we've got a solid coat. So again, we'll start on 1, work our way through all 5, and then we can move on to our next stage. You'll notice I've also painted the guns fully, ready for our red contrast paint. With that layer done, we're moving on to our next stage, which we need to make a 1 to 2 mix of Caribou Crimson and Lamy Medium. And we're going to apply this all over our termagants. So this will hit both the carapace and the flesh, giving them nice finned red or settle in the recesses, nicely shading everything a light pink. After leaving a good half hour to 40 minutes for that wash to dry, our termagants are ready for the next stage, which is to bring in Flaydron Flesh and give them an all over dry brush. So we'll get a nice large brush with some Flaydron Flesh on, and we'll work it into some tissue, working off most of that pigment. And then we're ready to bring it into our model. So this stage is both a tidy up and a layer, because we'll be able to cover over any areas that we've overspilled during the carapace painting stage. So any areas of grey you've got on the flesh, this will help hide quite nicely. Just work your way around the model, getting all the fleshy details as well as that carapace, so that we have a nice highlight to all the details we've just shaded down. With our dry brush down, ready to move on to the next stage, which is to pick out that carapace. So we're going to do 2 layers of Luxian purple, a nice vibrant purple, perfect for High Fleet Leviathan. So load our brush and we'll gently apply this to the carapace areas, so on the gun as well, and all down the body. Once we're finished with one model, we'll move to the next, and then by the time we finish our last model, the first should be dry and ready for the second layer. With the purple now dried, we're ready to move on to our next colour. So we're using Flesh Terrors Red. This is going to be for the hooves, the claws, and the gun as well. Trying to avoid, if we can, any areas where it's recessed, as that will need to be flesh later on, such as around the magazine here and the barrel as well. Also avoid the eye, as we'll need to paint that yellow later on. So yeah, working on the gun, claws, and of course these hooves back here. So again, we'll do this on each of our models, and by the time we finished our last model, we can move on to the next stage of our first model. With our red now dry, we're ready to move on to Fire Slayer Flesh, and this is going to be for any cables, ribbed areas, joints in the armor, and again any ribbed vent areas on the body. So start picking out all the details that we haven't yet applied paint to. Again, go across all your models, picking out all these little details. And then once you've finished your 5th model, your first should be dry and ready for the next stage. With all that flesh detail done, we're now ready to go to your shabby bone for the last few colours. So we're going to be basing all the teeth and any eyes. So this is kind of delicate work, so just hold your breath if need be. Make sure you don't overload your brush. And gently pick out the eyes and the teeth, as well as any eyes on the guns. Then you can apply the last few contrast paints before we call these guys done. There's the teeth layered. We're going to go to Skeleton Horde to contrast over the teeth, give them a nice bony looking colour. So just gently apply this over the teeth, getting it in the recesses. Like so. And our last contrast paint is Imperial Fist, and this is going to be for all the eyes. So we got the eye on the gun, and of course the 2 eyes on the termagant. So we get them glowing nice and evilly yellow. And our final paint to use is Nuln Oil, and we're going to give a shade just over the carapace and the guns to add a little bit of extra depth to them. And there we go, 5 termagants ready to swarm their next meal. We've just covered the basics on batch painting, and with all these tips you'll be able to get all 20 of your termagants painted up and ready for battle. And you'll also be able to get your terminators finished as well. Up next we learn all about moving and shooting, as our next training mission sees our Space Marines fight off a swarm of Tyranids as they retreat towards an exit zone. Stay tuned to get started, as there'll be a new special coming soon. We'll be looking at applying transfers to our models, now that we've got a model with some nice open spaces. Transfers is a fun way of adding extra detail to models without having to worry about freehand painting. Plus, it's not as hard as a lot of people make it sound. Until then, thank you all very much for watching, stay safe and happy hobbying. Goodbye!